of his campaign. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham is out of the race, but he joins us tonight in the audience. He says the airstrikes now in their 16th month have been ineffective. Dr. Carson.
Wait a minute. Who in their 16th month?
The airstrikes.
Oh, okay.
Now in their 16th month are ineffective. Dr. Carson, do you think Senator Graham is right in wanting to send 20,000 troops, ground troops, to Iraq and Syria to take out ISIS?
Well, there's no question that ISIS is a very serious problem, and I don't believe that this administration recognizes how serious it is. I think we need to do a lot more than we're doing. You recognize that the caliphate is what gives them the legitimacy to go out on a jihadist mission. So we need to take that away from them. The way to take that away from them is to talk to our military officials and ask them, what do you need in order to accomplish this goal? Our decision is then, do we give them what they need? I say yes, not only do we give them what they need, but we don't tie their hands behind their back so that they can go ahead and get the job done. In addition to that, we go ahead and we take the oil from them, their source of revenue. You know, some of these engagement rules that the administration has, we're not going to bomb a tanker that's coming out of there because there might be a person in it. Give me a break. Just tell them that you put people in there, we're going to bomb them. So don't put people in there if you don't want them bombed. You know, that's so simple. And then we need to shut down their mechanisms of funding and attack their command and control centers. Why should we let their people be sitting there smoking their cigars, sitting in their comfortable chairs in Raqqa? We know to go ahead and shut off the supply routes and send in our special ops at 2 a.m. and attack them everywhere they go. They should be running all the time. Then they won't have time to plan attacks against us.
Thank you, sir. Senator Graham has also said that the U.S. will find Arab support for its coalition if it removes Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. And I quote, "The now King of Saudi Arabia told us, you can have our army. You just got to deal with Assad. The Emir of Qatar said, I'll pay for the operation. But they are not going to fight ISIS and let Damascus fall into the hands of the Iranians. Assad has to go." Governor Christie, how important is it to remove Assad from power, and how would you do it?
Marie, you look at what this president and his Secretary of State Clinton, has done to get us in this spot. I mean, think about it. This is the president who said, along with his Secretary of State, drew a red line in Syria, said if Assad uses chemical weapons against his people, then we're going to attack. He used chemical weapons. He's killed now over 250,000 of his own people. And this president has done nothing. In fact, he's done worse than nothing. This president, and by the way, Secretary Clinton, who called Assad a reformer. She called Assad a reformer. Now, the fact is, what this president has done is invited Russia to play an even bigger role. Bring in Vladimir Putin to negotiate getting those chemical weapons back from Assad. Yet what do we have today? We have the Russians and the Iranians working together, not to fight ISIS, but to prop up Assad. The fact of the matter is, we're not going to have peace. We are not going to have peace in Syria. We're not going to be able to rebuild it unless we put a no-fly zone there, make it safe for those folks, so we don't have to be talking about Syrian refugees anymore. The Syrians should stay in Syria. They shouldn't be going to Europe. And here's the last piece. You're not going to have peace in Syria with Assad in charge. You're simply not. And so Senator Graham is right about this. And if we want to try to rebuild the coalitions, as Governor Kasich was saying before, then what we better do is to get to the Arab countries that believe that ISIS is a threat not only to them but to us and to world peace, and bring them together. And believe me, Assad is not worth it. And if you're going to leave this to Hillary Clinton, the person who gave us this foreign policy, the architect of it, and you're going to give her another 4 years, that's why I'm speaking out as strongly as I am about that. Hillary Clinton cannot be president. It will lead to even greater war in this world. And remember this, after Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama has had nearly 8 years, we have fewer democracies in the world than we had when they started. That makes the world less peaceful, less safe. In my administration, we will help to make sure that we bring people together in the Middle East, and we will fight ISIS and defeat them.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trump, your comments about banning Muslims from entering the country created a firestorm. According to Facebook, it was the most talked about moment online of your entire campaign, with more than 10 million people talking about the issue. Is there anything you've heard that makes you want to rethink this position?
No. No. Look, we have to stop with political correctness. We have to get down to creating a country that's not going to have the kind of problems that we've had with people flying planes into the World Trade Centers, with the shootings in California, with all the problems all over the world. I just left Indonesia, bomb, 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 bomb. We have to find out what's going on. I said temporarily. I didn't say permanently. I said temporarily. And I have many great Muslim friends. And some of them, I will say not all, have called me and said, Donald, thank you very much. You're exposing an unbelievable problem, and we have to get to the bottom of it. And unlike President Obama, where he refuses even to use the term of what's going on, he can't use the term for whatever reason. And if you can't use the term, you're never going to solve the problem. My Muslim friends, some, said, thank you very much. We'll get to the bottom of it. But we have a serious problem. And we can't be the stupid country anymore. We're laughed at all over the world.
Donald, can I hope you do this, because this policy is a policy that makes it impossible to build the coalition necessary to take out ISIS. The Kurds are our strongest allies. They're Muslim. You're not going to even allow them to come to our country? The other Arab countries have a role to play in this. We cannot be the world's policeman. We can't do this unilaterally. We have to do this in unison with the Arab world. And sending that signal makes it impossible for us to be serious about taking out ISIS and restoring democracy in Syria. So I hope you'll reconsider. I hope you'll reconsider. The better way of dealing with this, is recognizing that there are people in the Islamic terrorists embedded in refugee populations. What we ought to do is tighten up our efforts to deal with the entry visa program, so that a citizen from Europe, it's harder if they've been traveling to Syria or traveling these other places where there is Islamic terrorism, make it harder, make the screening take place. We don't have to have refugees come to our country, but all Muslims? Seriously? What kind of signal does that send to the rest of the world that the United States is a serious player in creating peace and security?
You said that he made those comments and they represented him being unhinged, yet after he made them...
Yeah, they are unhinged.
Well, after he made them, his poll numbers went up 8 points in South Carolina. Now, wait.
11 points to be exact.
Are you saying that all those people who agree with Mr. Trump are unhinged?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. I can see why people are angry and scared, because this president has created a condition where our national security has weakened dramatically. I totally get that. But we're running for presidency of the United States here. This isn't, a different kind of job. You have to lead. You cannot make rash statements and expect the rest of the world to respond as though, well, it's just politics. Every time we send signals like this, we send a signal of weakness, not strength. And so it was an unhinged statement, which is why I'm asking him to consider changing his views.
I want security for this country, okay? I want security. I'm tired of seeing what's going on between the border, where the people flow over, people come in, they live, they shoot. I want security for this country. We have a serious problem with, as you know, with radical Islam. We have a tremendous problem. It's not only a problem here, it's a problem all over the world. I want to find out why those two young people, those two horrible young people in California, when they shot the 14 people, killed them, people they knew, people that held a wedding reception for them. I want to find out, many people saw pipe bombs and all sorts of things all over their apartment. Why weren't they vigilant? Why didn't they call? Why didn't they call the police? And by the way, the police are the most mistreated people in this country. I will tell you that. The most mistreated people.
But can I say,
we need vigilance. We have to find out. Many people knew about what was going on. Why didn't they turn those two people in so that you wouldn't have had all the death? There's something going on, and it's bad. And I'm saying we have to get to the bottom of it. That's all I'm saying.
We
need security.
We want to hear from all of you on this. According to Pew Research, the U.S. admits more than 100,000 Muslim immigrants every single year on a permanent lifetime basis. I want to ask the rest of you to comment on this. Do you agree that we should pause Muslim immigration until we get a better handle on our homeland security situation, as Mr. Trump has said, beginning with you, Governor Kasich?
No, I've been for pausing on admitting the Syrian refugees. And the reason why I've done is I don't believe we have a good process of being able to vet them. But, you know, we don't want to put everybody in the same category. And, you know, I'll go back to something that had been mentioned just a few minutes ago. If we're going to have a coalition, we're going to have a coalition not just of people in the western part of the world, our European allies, but we need the Saudis, we need the Egyptians, we need the Jordanians, we need the Gulf states, we need Jordan. We need all of them to be part of exactly what the first George Bush put together in the first Gulf War. It was a coalition made up of Arabs and Americans and Westerners, and we're going to need it again. And if we try to put everybody in the same, call everybody the same thing, we can't do it. And that's just not acceptable. But I think a pause on Syrian refugees has been exactly right for all the governors that have called for it, and also, of course, for me as the governor of Ohio.
Thank you, sir. We want to hear from the rest of you. Governor Christie, your take.
Maria, listen, I said right from the beginning that we should take no Syrian refugees of any kind. And the reason I said that is because the FBI director told the American people, told Congress, that he could not guarantee he could vet them and it would be safe. That's the end of the conversation. I can tell you, after spending 7 years as a former federal prosecutor, right after 9/11, dealing with this issue, here's the way you need to deal with it. You can't just ban all Muslims. You have to ban radical Islamic jihadists. You have to ban the people who are trying to hurt us. And the only way to figure that out is to go back to getting the intelligence community the funding and the tools that it needs to be able to keep America safe. And this summer we didn't do that. We took it away from the NSA. It was a bad decision by the president, bad by those in the Senate who voted for it. And if I'm president, we'll make our intelligence community strong, and we won't have to keep everybody out. We're just going to keep the bad folks out and make sure they don't harm us.
Thank you, sir. Senator Rubio, where do you stand?
Well, first of all, let's understand why we're even having this debate and why, you know, Donald's tapped into some of that anger that's out there about this whole issue, because this president has consistently underestimated the threat of ISIS. If you listen to the State of the Union the other night, he described them as a bunch of guys with long beards on the back of a pickup truck. They are much more than that. This is a group of people that enslaves women and sells them as brides. This is a group of people that burns people in cages, that is conducting genocide against Christians and Yazidis and others in the region. This is not some small-scale group. They are radicalizing people here in the United States. They're conducting attacks around the world. So you know what needs to happen? It's a very simple equation, and it's going to happen when I'm president. If we do not know who you are, and we do not know why you are coming, when I am president, you are not getting into the United States of America.
Senator Cruz, where do you stand? Senator Cruz.
You know, I understand why Donald made the comments he did, and I understand why Americans are feeling frustrated and scared and angry when we have a president who refuses to acknowledge the threat we face, and even worse, who acts as an apologist for radical Islamic terrorism. But I think what we need is a commander-in-chief who is focused like a laser on keeping this country safe and on defeating radical Islamic terrorism. What should we do? First, we should pass the Expatriate Terrorist Act, legislation I've introduced that says if an American goes and joins ISIS and wages jihad against America, that you forfeit your citizenship and you cannot come in on a passport. And secondly, we should pass the legislation that I've introduced that suspends all refugees from nations that ISIS or al-Qaeda control significant territory. Just last week, we saw 2 Iraqi refugees vetted using the same process the president says will work, that were arrested for being alleged ISIS terrorists. If I am elected president, we will not let in refugees from countries controlled by ISIS or al-Qaeda. And when it comes to ISIS, we will not weaken them, we will not degrade them, we will utterly and completely destroy ISIS.
Dr. Carson, where do you stand? Do you agree with Mr. Trump?
Well, first of all, I recognize it is a substantial problem, but like all of our problems, there isn't a single one that can't be solved that cannot be solved with common sense if you remove the ego and the politics. And clearly what we need to do is get a group of experts together, including people from other countries, some of our friends from Israel, who've had experience screening these people, and come up with some new guidelines for immigration and for visas for people who are coming into this country. That's the thing that obviously makes sense. We can do that. And as far as the Syrians are concerned, Al-Saqqa province, perfect place. They have infrastructure. All we need to do is protect them. They'll be in their own country. And that's what they told me when I was in Jordan in November. Let's listen to them, and let's not listen to our politicians.
So it should be clear that both of you do not agree with Mr. Trump.
So are we going to ban Muslims from India, from Indonesia, from countries that are our strong allies that we need to build better relationships with? Of course not. What we need to do is destroy ISIS. I laid out a plan at the Citadel to do just that. And it starts with creating a no-fly zone and safe zones to make sure refugees are there. We need to lead a force, a Sunni-led force, inside of Syria. We need to embed with the Iraqi military. We need to arm the Kurds directly. We need to reestablish the relationships with the Sunnis. And we need the lawyers off the back of the warfighters. That's how you solve the problem. You don't solve it by big talk where you're banning all Muslims and making it harder for us to build the kind of coalition for us to be successful.
Thank you, Governor.
Mr. Trump, sometimes, and maybe in the heat of a campaign, you say things and you have to dial them back. Last week, the New York Times editorial board quoted you as saying that you would impose up to a 45% tariff on Chinese goods.
That's wrong. They were wrong. It's the New York Times. They're always wrong.
Well,
they were wrong.
You never said it because they provided
what I said
a
at an
transcript of your
editorial board
remarks.
I would use, they were asking me what to do about North Korea. China, they don't like to tell us, but they have total control, just about, of North Korea. They can solve the problem of North Korea if they wanted to. But they taunt us. They say, well, we don't really have control. Without China, North Korea doesn't even eat. China is ripping us on trade. They're devaluing their currency, and they're killing our companies. Thousands and thousands. You look at the number of companies and the number in terms of manufacturing and plants that we've lost, 50,000 because of China.
So now, you never advocated putting a tariff on their goods?
We've lost anywhere between 4 and 7 million jobs because of China. What I said this. We have very unfair trade with China. We're going to have a trade deficit of $505 billion this year with China. A lot of that is because they devalue their currency. What I said to the New York Times is that we have great power, economic power over China. And if we wanted to use that, and the amount, and where the 45% comes in, that would be the amount based on their devaluations that we should get. What I'm saying is this, I'm not saying we do it, but if they don't start treating us fairly and stop devaluing and let their currency rise so that our companies can compete and we don't lose all of these millions of jobs that we're losing, I would certainly start taxing goods that come in from China. Who the hell has to lose $505 billion a year?
I'm sorry, sir, you lost me, but I do want to understand that.
Well, it's not that complicated, actually.
Then I apologize. But then I want to understand, if you don't want a 45% tariff, you say that wasn't the figure, would you be open, or are you open to slapping a higher tariff on Chinese goods of any sort to go back at them?
Okay, just so you understand, I know so much about trade with China. Carl Icahn today, as you know, endorsed me. Many businessmen want to endorse me.
I know, but that's
Carl said, no, but he's somebody that, these are the kind of people that we should use to negotiate. Not the kind of people that we have who are political hacks who don't know what they're doing, and we have problems like this. So these are the kind of people. We should use our best and our finest.
All right, now, on that tariff, yes or no?
No, here's what I'm saying. China, they send their goods in, we don't tax, they do whatever they want to do, they do whatever they do. Okay. When we do business with China, they tax us. You don't know it, they tax us. I have many friends that deal with China. They can't deal. Number one, they don't want the product. And when they finally get the product, it is taxed. And if you look at what happened with Boeing, and if you look at what happened with so many companies that deal. So, we don't have an equal playing field. I'm saying, absolutely, we don't have to continue to lose $505 billion as a trade deficit for the privilege of dealing with China. I'm a free trader. I believe believe it. But we have to be smart, and we have to use smart people to negotiate. I have the largest bank in the world as a tenant of mine. I sell tens of millions of dollars. I love China. I love the Chinese people, but they laugh themselves. They can't believe how stupid the American leadership is.
So you're open to a tariff?
I'm totally open to a tariff. If they don't treat us fairly, hey, their whole trade thing is tariff. You can't deal in China without tariff. They do it to us, we don't do it. It's not fair trade.
Neil, let me say one thing about this. I'm a free trader. I supported NAFTA. I believe in the PTT because it's important those countries in Asia are an interface against China. And we do need China. Donald's right about North Korea. I mean, the fact is that they need to put the pressure on, and frankly, we need to intercept ships coming out of North Korea so they don't proliferate all this dangerous material. But what he's talking about, I think, has got merit. And I'm not putting that tariff or whatever he's saying here, but here's what I am saying.
I'm liking him tonight.
For too long, what happens is somebody dumps their product in our country and takes our people's jobs, and then we go to an international court. And it takes them like a year or two to figure out whether they were cheating us. And guess what? The worker's out of a job. So when they be found against that country that's selling products in here lower than the cost of what it takes to produce them, then what do we tell the worker? Oh, well, you know, it just didn't work out for you. I think we should be for free trade, but I think fair trade. And when countries violate trade agreements or dump products in this country, we need to stand up against those countries that do that without making them into an enemy. And I want to just suggest to you, how do I know this? Because so many people in my family worked in steel mills. And they didn't work with a white collar, they worked in a blue collar. And the fact is, those jobs are critical. They're hardworking members of the middle class, and they need to be paid attention to because they're Americans and they carry the load. So let's demand open trade, but fair trade in this country. That's what I think we need to do.
But on this point, if I may add something on this point, we are all frustrated with what China's doing. I think we need to be very careful with tariffs, and here's why. China doesn't pay the tariff. The buyer pays the tariff. If you send a tie or a shirt made in China into the United States and an American goes to buy it at the store and there's a tariff on it, it gets passed on in the price to the consumer. So I think the better approach, the best thing we can do to protect ourselves against China economically is to make our economy stronger, which means reversing course from all the damage Barack Obama is doing to this economy. It begins with tax reform. Let's not have the most expensive business tax rate in the world. Let's allow companies to immediately expense. It continues with regulatory reform. Regulations in this country are out of control, especially the Employment Prevention Agency, the EPA, and all of the rules they continue to impose on our economy and hurting us. How about Obamacare, a certified job killer? It needs to be repealed and replaced. And we need to bring our debt under control, make our economy stronger. That is the way to deal with China at the end of the day.
Neil, the problem with what Marco is saying is that it takes too long. They're sucking us dry, and it takes too long. It would just, you absolutely have to get involved with China. They are taking so much of what we have in terms of jobs, in terms of money. We just can't do it any longer.
He is right. If you put a tariff on the good, it's Americans who pay it.
Absolutely.
You're looking at me?
Prices go higher for...
Can I tell you what? It'll never happen because they'll let their currency go up. They're never going to let it happen. Japan, the same thing. They are devaluing. It's so impossible for you look at Caterpillar Tractor and what's happening with Caterpillar and Komatsu. Komatsu's a tractor company in Japan. Friends of mine are ordering Komatsu tractors now because they've devalued the yen to such an extent that you can't buy a Caterpillar tractor. And we're letting them get away with it, and we can't let them get away with it. And that's why we have to use Carl, and we have to use our great business people, and not political hacks to negotiate with these countries.
Apart from the higher prices on consumers and people are living paycheck to paycheck, apart from that, there'll be retaliation.
Yeah.
So the soybean sales from Iowa, entire soybean production goes, the equivalent of it goes to China. Or how about Boeing right here within a mile? Do you think that the Chinese, if they had a 45% tariff imposed on all their imports, wouldn't retaliate and start buying Airbus? Of course they would. This would be devastating for our economy. We need someone with a steady hand being President of the United States.
Real quick, Senator. Yeah. Go ahead, Senator Cruz, and then we have to get to tax reform.
And we don't need a weak person being President of the United States, okay? Because that's what we'd get if it were I'll tell you what. We don't need that. We don't need that. That's essentially what we have now, and we don't need that.
Briefly,
And that's why we're in the trouble that we're now. And by the way, Jeff, you mentioned Boeing. Take a look. They order planes. They make Boeing build their plant in China. They don't want them made here. They want those planes made in China.
They're a mile
That's
away
not the
from it.
way the game is supposed to be played.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Very briefly.
Hey, my name was mentioned. My name was mentioned here. The simple fact is that the plane that's being built here is being sold to China. You can, if you flew in with your 767, didn't you? Right there, right next to the plant.
No, the new planes. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in the future. They're building massive plants in China because China does not want Boeing building their planes here. They want them built in China because China happens to be smart the way they do it, not the way we do it.
When you head back to the airport tonight, go check and see.
Oh, yeah,
what the
I'll check for you.
Check it out.
Senator, briefly.
Thanks for coming back to me, Maria. Both Donald and Jeb have good points, and there is a middle ground. Donald is right that China is running over President Obama like he is a child, that President Obama is not protecting American workers, and we are getting hammered. You know, I sat down with the senior leadership of John Deere. They discussed how hard it is to sell tractors in China because all the regulatory barriers, they're protectionist. But Jeb is also right that if we just impose a tariff, they'll put reciprocal tariffs, which will hurt Iowa farmers and South Carolina producers and 20% of the American jobs that depend on exports. So the way you do it is you pass a tax plan like the tax plan I've introduced, a simple flat tax, 10% for individuals and a 16% business flat tax. You abolish the IRS. And here's the critical point, Maria. The business flat tax enables us to abolish the corporate income tax, the death tax, the Obamacare taxes, the payroll taxes, and they're border adjustable. So every export pays no taxes whatsoever. It's tax-free, a huge advantage for our farmers and ranchers and manufacturers. And every import pays the 16% business flat tax. It's like a tariff, but here's the difference. If we impose a tariff, China responds. The business flat tax, they already impose their taxes on us, so there's no reciprocal tariffs that come against us. It puts us on a level, even playing field, which brings jobs here at home. And as president, I'm going to fight for the working men and women.
Maria, but what he leaves out is...
We've got to get to tax reform, gentlemen. We've got to get to tax reform.
Yeah, but I want to talk about taxes.
We've got to get to the national debt as well. Coming up next, the growing national debt, the war on crime, tax reform. More from North Charleston, South Carolina, when we come right back.